My brother tried to embarrass me in front of everyone, but he forgot one crucial detail. Do you remember Satie, your childhood friend who cried all the time? My brother Wesley asked in a warm voice that always meant trouble. I just feel so terrible that she never gets invited to anything, he continued. Since you're single, why don't you bring her as your +1? That way, at least you won't be alone at my wedding. I almost laughed. He felt bad for her after nearly shoving her off the dock as a kid and laughing while she cried to her mom. I doubted it, but I still agreed to his request. Satie was always a nice kid, even if she hid behind me when she got picked on and cried all the time. But I didn't realize my brother Wesley had something else in mind until he forgot to hang up the call properly. I heard him go back to snickering to a friend on his laptop. My brother's actually bringing Satie. Can you believe it? I told him to bring her out of kindness, and he actually bought it. Wait until everyone sees him walking in with that crybaby. They'll see just how desperate and pathetic his dating life is compared to mine. My eyes widened. I fell right into his trap. And if I backed out now, I was sure he'd turn it around and make me look petty and jealous. So I tracked down Satie through old school contacts and immediately told her everything, thinking I could at least save one of us from embarrassment. When I called, she sounded genuinely surprised, but still agreed to come. I appreciate you looking out for me, but I won't let you go through this alone. Besides, I haven't been to a wedding in years, she said. This could be fun. On the day of the wedding, I was prepared for disaster. I'd even practiced comebacks for when people laughed at Satie. Then, the doorbell rang. I opened it expecting to see the same scrawny kid with thick glasses and chronic allergies. Instead, I was standing face to face with a woman who looked like she had walked off a magazine cover, in a deep green dress that fit like it was made for her. Hi, I'm looking for Satie, I said, nervously shifting around. Yep, that's me. Ready to go, the stunning woman responded. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. This was not Satie. Sure, everyone had a little bit of a glow up since high school, but nothing like this. Come on, you're not crybaby Satie, she grinned. Well, I'm not a crybaby anymore, but if it helps, the dress does make me look a little different. But it wasn't the dress. Even when we walked into the wedding hall, every head turned. Some jaws dropped so low they nearly hit the carpet. My brother's fake warm greeting died on his lips. Satie. His eyes bulged out. Hey Wesley, it's been years. Thanks for inviting me to your wedding. No one could focus on the ceremony, not with the most beautiful woman in the room sitting near the aisle, completely stealing the show. My brother looked furious. He tried to recover his plan during the reception, loudly telling his groomsmen how Satie used to cry during PE class. But Satie was ready. She looked at me with a soft expression and said warmly, "That's why I was lucky to have this guy help me through my panic attacks. He was like an angel." My brother had no choice but to smile and agree with the compliment while his groomsmen cooed about how sweet I was. He tried again later during the wedding toasts, bringing up how Satie used to get stuffed in lockers, but she just laughed. And now I couldn't fit in one even if I tried, she said, and the whole table laughed with her. Everyone nearby was charmed. Then he pulled out his final trump card. He mentioned her weird anime drawings and how she probably still watches it like a nerd, but his new wife's face lit up. Hey, I'm a huge anime nerd too, she grinned. Wesley's face scrunched up. What the? You never told me you watched cartoons? Satie and I giggled on the side, watching them break out into their first fight as newlyweds. Things only got worse when my mother pulled Wesley aside and gushed about Satie, asking, "Why didn't you tell me your brother was dating someone so successful?" And during the first dance, nobody paid attention to the bride and groom. Everyone's eyes were on Satie as she danced with me. Wesley finally snapped and cornered me by the coat room. All right, spill. Where did you find this actress? This isn't the real Satie. But when I tried to explain that it really was crybaby Satie, he refused to listen and just dragged me back to the reception. He asked the DJ to stop and place the spotlight on us. Everyone's curious. What's your little love story? He expected me to admit this was all just a setup, a ruse, but Satie stepped in and took the microphone. He called me out of the blue. I was honestly shocked because I'd been wanting to date him since we were kids. I just never had the courage. But this wedding finally gave me the chance, she said, looking straight at me. I felt my heart race as the entire room erupted in cheers. Wesley couldn't do anything but stand there while his evil plan turned him into the greatest matchmaker. But the real shock came the next morning. Wesley sent me a photo, a yearbook picture of Satie from high school. The person in the photo was completely different from the woman who'd been my date. Completely different face, different height. Interesting date choice, he texted. Wonder what happened to the actual Satie. I turned to look at the woman still sleeping in my bed. If you're not Satie, who are you? And what happened to Satie? She gave me this cold smirk. My whole body went cold staring at that smirk. My phone kept buzzing on the nightstand, but I couldn't look away from her face. This woman in my bed wasn't Satie. She never was. My hand started shaking as I grabbed my phone and saw 3 texts from Wesley with a yearbook photo attached. The kid in that photo looked nothing like the woman sitting up in my sheets right now. I forced my voice to stay steady, even though my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Who are you? What's your real name? She stretched like this was a normal morning and gave me this calm smile that made my skin crawl. My name's Rowan. I figured you'd realize sooner. Honestly, she said it so casually, like we were talking about the weather. I stared at her, waiting for more of an explanation. She sat up against my headboard looking completely comfortable. I knew Satie when we were kids, thought it would be poetic justice to show up as her at your brother's wedding after how he treated us back then. Her explanation sounded practiced, like she'd rehearsed it, but something felt off about the whole thing. My brain kept screaming at me to get her out of my apartment right now. I pulled the blanket tighter around myself and stood up. You need to leave right now. My voice came out firmer than I expected, but my hands were still shaking. Rowan didn't move fast. She took her time getting out of bed and finding her clothes from last night. The whole time she kept talking about how real our connection felt and how I was overreacting to something that didn't really matter. She pulled on her dress slowly like she had all the time in the world. We had fun, right? Does it really matter what name I used? I wanted to scream at her, but I just pointed at my door. Get out now. She finally left, but not before giving me this look like I was being unreasonable. The second my door closed, I locked it and checked it twice. Then I grabbed my phone and called Silas because I needed someone to tell me I wasn't crazy for feeling scared and violated right now. He picked up on the second ring and I barely got the words out before my voice cracked. He told me to stay put and he'd be there in 20 minutes. I sat on my couch staring at my door until I heard him knock. Silas came in with 2 coffees and his laptop already open. He sat next to me and put a hand on my shoulder. Okay, tell me everything from the beginning. We started going through every single interaction I'd had with Satie from the first message to last night. Silas pulled up the Instagram account that had messaged me about the wedding. The account was created 3 weeks before Wesley's wedding. Only 3 weeks. The profile photo was blurry enough that I couldn't really see her face clearly. I should have noticed that. Silas squeezed my shoulder. You were trying to be kind. That's not your fault. I pulled up the yearbook photo Wesley sent me and put it next to the wedding photos on my phone. The differences were so obvious now that I was actually looking. Real Satie had a rounder face and was way shorter, maybe 5'3". She had different features completely. The woman who left my apartment this morning was almost 5'10" and looked nothing like childhood Satie. How did I miss this? Silas asked me the hard question then. Did anything happen last night that you didn't consent to? I had to sit with that for a minute. I consented to everything we did, but I consented thinking she was someone else. The violation felt complicated in a way I couldn't put into words yet. Silas nodded like he understood, even though I barely understood it myself. We need to find the real Satie. Prove that Rowan isn't her. Silas opened his laptop and started searching. I tried to remember specific things about childhood Satie that only she would know. She had a birthmark on her left arm. She was scared of dogs after one chased her in 3rd grade. She collected trading cards and kept them in a blue binder. Silas typed while I talked. He pulled up Facebook first, but there were too many people with that name. Then he tried LinkedIn and filtered by our hometown. There, a profile for a Satie matching our age range. Works in IT for a company in Portland. Her profile photo showed a woman who looked exactly like the yearbook picture, just older, 15 years older, but definitely the same person. Round face, shorter build, glasses, nothing like Rowan. My hand started shaking again as I stared at that photo. I was completely deceived, and I let it happen so easily. Silas grabbed my laptop and opened a new tab. We need to secure everything right now. He pulled up my email account and started walking me through password changes. I typed in new passwords for my email, my bank accounts, my social media, even my Netflix because I couldn't remember what Rowan might have seen when she was in my apartment. Silas made me write each new password in a notebook and hide it in my desk drawer. He pulled out his phone and looked up how to change apartment door codes online. I followed the instructions, my fingers shaking as I entered the new 6-digit combination into the keypad by my front door. The beep confirming the change felt like the first actual thing I'd done to protect myself since Rowan walked out this morning. But even as we worked through the security checklist, my brain kept replaying moments from the wedding. How she knew exactly what to say to counter Wesley's attacks. How she touched my arm when we danced. How she looked at me during that microphone speech like she actually cared. Every memory felt contaminated now. Silas squeezed my shoulder. You couldn't have known. She planned this. I picked up my phone to call Wesley. Silas raised his eyebrows but didn't stop me. Wesley answered on the second ring. I told him everything in one rushed explanation. Rowan wasn't Satie. She lied about her entire identity. She manipulated both of us. The silence on the other end lasted maybe 5 seconds before Wesley's voice came back sharp and defensive. Okay, so you brought some random woman to my wedding and now you're trying to make it my fault. I felt my jaw clench. You set me up to be humiliated. You wanted everyone to laugh at me for bringing the crybaby kid. That's what created the opening for Rowan to step in and pretend to be her. Wesley scoffed. I didn't tell her to lie about who she was. That's on you for not recognizing your own childhood friend. Maybe if you'd actually kept in touch with people instead of being so isolated, you would have known what Satie really looked like. His words hit exactly where he intended. You literally sent me the yearbook photo proving she's not Satie. You know I was deceived. And you're still trying to make this about my judgment instead of taking any responsibility for setting up a cruel trap at your own wedding. Wesley's voice got louder. I was just having fun. Everyone plays little jokes at weddings. You're the one who slept with a complete stranger and now you want to blame me because you feel stupid. I hung up. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. Silas took it from me and set it on the coffee table. He's not going to help. I know, but I needed to hear him say it out loud. Silas nodded and pulled his laptop closer. He started typing something while I sat there feeling the anger burn hotter than the fear for a minute. Rowan had to know about Wesley's plans somehow. She knew exactly what he was trying to do, which means she was either watching our family dynamics online or she had some previous connection to us that let her know about the wedding trap. The thought made my skin crawl. This wasn't some random opportunity she stumbled into. She planned this. She researched us. She knew Wesley wanted to humiliate me, and she used that knowledge to slide into Satie's identity at the perfect moment. Silas looked up from his screen. This is way more calculated than just some person pretending to be someone else for fun. This is someone with a grudge or an obsession who saw her chance and took it. I spent the rest of the day checking my door lock every 20 minutes. Every notification on my phone made me jump. Every footstep in the hallway outside my apartment made me freeze and listen until it passed. Silas stayed through the afternoon even though I knew he had work stuff to do. We ordered Chinese food because I couldn't imagine going to a restaurant where Rowan might show up. The delivery guy knocked and I made Silas answer the door while I watched from the kitchen. I felt ridiculous and violated and angry all at the same time. We ate on my couch with the TV on, but I couldn't focus on anything playing. Silas kept up a steady stream of conversation about normal things, his job, his annoying coworker, some show he was watching. I was grateful he wasn't making me talk about Rowan every second, even though she was all I could think about. When Silas finally left around 8, I locked the door behind him and checked it 3 times. I tried to watch TV, but gave up after 30 minutes of staring at the screen without processing anything. I got ready for bed early, thinking maybe I could sleep off the worst of the anxiety. I laid in bed staring at the ceiling. Every small sound in my apartment building felt threatening. The neighbor's door closing, someone walking up the stairs, the building settling, the heater clicking on. My mind kept spinning through worst-case scenarios. What if Rowan kept a key to my apartment somehow? What if she copied information from my laptop while I was asleep? What if she took photos of me that I don't know about? What if she shows up at my work? I checked my phone. 11:30. I tried closing my eyes, but my brain wouldn't shut off. At 1:15, I got up and checked the door lock again. At 2:30, I checked all my windows. At 3 in the morning, I finally gave up and texted Silas. I know you're probably asleep, but I can't stop thinking about what she might do next. He texted back within 2 minutes. I'm awake. Do you want me to come back over? I told him no, but thank you, and that just knowing he was awake helped. We texted back and forth for another hour about nothing important until I finally felt calm enough to try sleeping again. I dozed off around 4:30 and woke up at 7 hours feeling worse than if I hadn't slept at all, but lying in bed feeling anxious wasn't helping anything. I got up and made coffee. I needed to approach this like a problem I could solve instead of just a thing that happened to me. I opened my laptop and created a new document. I titled it Rowan Timeline and started writing down everything I knew. When she first messaged me, what the account name was, every conversation we had leading up to the wedding, everything she said at the wedding itself, every interaction after. I went through my phone and took screenshots of all our text messages. I wrote down everything she told me about her supposed life, her job that she was vague about, her apartment that she never invited me to, the gym she claimed to go to but never specified which one. Every detail I dismissed as normal now looked like a red flag I should have caught. Silas came back over mid-morning with more coffee and bagels. He sat next to me and looked at my timeline document. This is good. This is really good. We need to find out where she actually lives and works. He opened my phone settings and started going through location history. I watched him scroll through weeks of data. Look at this. Every time you two met up, it was either here at your place or at public spots like coffee shops or restaurants. She never once invited you to her apartment. I pulled the laptop closer and added that to my notes. I tried to remember specific conversations from the wedding and after. Every time I'd asked Rowan detailed questions about her life, she'd deflected. When I mentioned maybe visiting her place sometime, she'd changed the subject to how much she loved being at my apartment because it felt cozy. When I asked about meeting her friends, she'd said something about them all being busy with work. Every deflection had seemed smooth and natural at the time. Now they looked like obvious evasion tactics. Silas pulled up our text message history, and we read through everything chronologically. She always messaged first. She texted at weird hours like 2 hours in the morning or 6 hours in the morning, like she was checking when I was online. The pattern felt creepy now in a way I dismissed as her being really interested when I thought she was Satie reconnecting with an old friend. Silas pointed at the screen. She was monitoring your activity, seeing when you were awake and active so she could time her messages to seem natural. I added all of it to my timeline. Then I opened LinkedIn and searched for the real Satie. Her profile came up again with that photo that looked exactly like the yearbook picture, just older. I clicked the message button and started typing. Hi Satie, this is going to sound strange, but someone impersonated you at my brother's wedding last month. I'm trying to verify some information and wanted to confirm that you weren't at a wedding in our hometown recently. I kept it short and factual. I didn't want to sound crazy or accusatory. I just needed confirmation that Rowan definitely wasn't somehow the real Satie with a different past than I remembered. I hit send and closed the laptop. Silas looked at me. Now what? Now we wait and see if she responds, and I figure out what to do next if she confirms that she wasn't there. Silas closed his laptop and looked at me with that serious expression he gets when he's about to say something I won't want to hear. He suggested I think about hiring a private investigator to find out who Rowan really is and whether I'm actually in danger. The idea made my stomach hurt because I'm already barely making rent, and my savings account is basically empty. But the thought of not knowing who this person is or what she wants felt way more dangerous than being broke for a few months. Silas must have seen the panic on my face because he immediately pulled out his phone and started searching for investigators in our area. I watched him scroll through websites while my brain kept circling back to the fact that I slept with someone whose real name I don't even know. After about 20 minutes, Silas found a website for someone named Keith Warner who focused on digital investigations and identity verification. His rates were listed right on the site, and they were steep. Like really steep, but not completely impossible if I cut back on everything else for a while. Silas looked at the consultation fee and offered to split it with me as a loan, which made me want to say no because I hate borrowing money, but I also couldn't do this alone. I nodded, and he immediately called to set up an appointment for that evening. While we waited for Keith's office to call back with a time, my phone buzzed with a text from Rowan. My whole body went cold when I saw her name on the screen. Silas grabbed my phone before I could and read the message out loud. Rowan was asking if I was okay and saying she wanted to talk through what happened, using the same warm and caring tone she'd used throughout the entire wedding. And after, she wrote like we'd had some minor fight about where to eat dinner, not like she'd lied about her entire identity and tricked me into sleeping with her. I felt my skin crawl reading her words because she was acting like I was overreacting to something small instead of being completely violated by her deception. Silas handed my phone back and told me not to respond under any circumstances. He pointed out that Rowan was testing me to see if I'd engage with her, probably trying to figure out whether I was angry enough to actually take action, or if she could smooth everything over with her charm like she probably had with other people before. His outside perspective helped me see the manipulation tactics that I definitely would have fallen for if I was processing this alone, because part of me wanted to believe her warm tone meant she wasn't actually dangerous. Keith's office called back and gave us an appointment time for 7 that evening. I spent the rest of the afternoon organizing all my documentation into a clear timeline with screenshots and notes about every inconsistency I could remember. Silas helped me print everything out and put it in a folder so I'd look prepared and serious instead of like some dramatic person making up stories. At 6:30, we drove to Keith's office in a building downtown that looked professional and legitimate, which made me feel slightly better about spending money I didn't have. Keith met us in the lobby and brought us back to his office, which had filing cabinets and computer equipment and framed certificates on the walls. He was probably in his 40s with gray hair and glasses, and he treated the whole situation like a serious case instead of making me feel stupid for being deceived. That alone was worth something after Wesley's reaction that morning. I showed him my timeline and all the information I had about Rowan, including the wedding photos and the phone number she'd used to contact me. Keith looked through everything carefully and asked specific questions about Rowan's behavior and what she'd said about her life. He explained that he'd start with something called open source intelligence gathering, which meant using the photos from the wedding and the phone number and any other digital footprints to identify who Rowan actually is. He warned me this might take a week or maybe 2, and that I absolutely should not engage with Rowan at all during the investigation because it could tip her off that I was looking into her background. I asked Keith if this kind of situation happens often because I felt so stupid for not seeing through Rowan's lies. Keith told me that identity deception in dating contexts happens way more than people realize, usually for financial scams, but sometimes for revenge or because someone is obsessed with another person. Hearing that I wasn't uniquely foolish helped a little bit, though I still felt angry at myself for ignoring all the signs that were probably obvious now that I looked back. Silas and I left Keith's office around 8 and went back to my apartment. Over the next few days, Rowan kept sending occasional texts that switched between friendly check-ins, asking how my day was, and slightly wounded messages about me ghosting her after we'd had such a great connection. I saved every single message exactly like Keith told me to, but I didn't respond to any of them, even though part of me really wanted to confront her directly about all her lies and ask her what she thought she was doing. On the 3rd day after I'd sent my LinkedIn message to Real Satie, she finally responded. My hands were shaking when I opened the message because I knew this would confirm everything one way or another. Satie wrote that she was really confused because she definitely wasn't at any wedding, and she hasn't been back to our hometown in 5 years since her parents moved to Arizona. She included a current photo of herself that showed a woman who looked exactly like the yearbook picture, just aged up about 15 years with the same round face and features that were completely different from Rowan's. Seeing that photo made everything real in a way that hurt my chest because now I had definite proof that Rowan was an imposter using Satie's childhood identity. I messaged Satie back right away explaining the full situation about my brother's wedding and how someone showed up claiming to be her. Satie responded within an hour saying she was shocked and really sympathetic about what happened to me. She said she vaguely remembered some girl named Rowan from elementary school who hung around the edges of their friend group and seemed kind of obsessed with fitting in. Satie offered to do a phone call if it would help me understand the situation better, which felt like the first genuinely kind thing someone had done without any hidden motive since this whole mess started. I scheduled the call with Satie for that same evening because waiting felt impossible when every minute without answers made my skin crawl. When my phone rang at 7, I answered on the first ring and heard her voice, which sounded nothing like Rowan's smoother tone. Satie started by saying she'd been thinking about Rowan all afternoon and remembered more details now that her memory was jogging. She told me Rowan was this kid who hung around their friend group in elementary school, but never quite fit in, always trying too hard to be funny or cool in ways that felt forced. Satie said Rowan got weirdly fixated on people, like she'd pick someone and try to copy everything they did or said, almost like she was studying them. She moved away in middle school, so Satie lost touch with everyone from back then, but she remembered Rowan had this strange habit of blaming other kids when social stuff went wrong for her. Like if Rowan didn't get invited to a birthday party, she'd convince herself it was because Satie or someone else had talked badly about her, even when that wasn't true at all. Satie's voice got quieter when she said Rowan seemed to think Satie was somehow responsible for Rowan not being popular, which made no sense because Satie was getting bullied herself back then. Then Satie brought up something that made my stomach drop even further. She said Wesley and his friends were cruel to lots of kids, not just her, and Rowan was definitely one of their targets too. Satie remembered Rowan trying to get revenge once by spreading rumors about Wesley and his group, but it backfired completely and made things way worse for her. The other kids started avoiding Rowan even more after that, and Wesley's group made her life miserable for the rest of that school year. Satie paused and then said something that made everything click into place. She told me it seemed like Rowan had been nursing these grudges for over 15 years, just waiting for the right moment to act on them. The wedding must have looked like the perfect opportunity to get back at Wesley, while also inserting herself into a situation where she could feel important and desired. I thanked Satie for being so honest and helpful when she didn't have to be. Then I asked if she'd be willing to provide a written statement confirming she wasn't at the wedding in case I needed it for legal stuff. Satie agreed right away, but asked me to please keep her out of any public drama because she had her own life now and didn't want to get dragged into whatever mess Rowan had created. I completely understood that request, since Satie was just an innocent person whose identity got stolen for someone else's twisted scheme. After we hung up, I sat there feeling like puzzle pieces were finally coming together, even though the picture they formed was really disturbing. 2 days passed where I barely slept, jumping at every sound and checking my locks obsessively. Then Keith called with his first report, and I grabbed my phone so fast I almost dropped it. He told me he'd traced the phone number Rowan used back to a prepaid account bought with cash, so there was no direct name attached to it, but the metadata from the wedding photos I'd sent him told a different story. Those photos were taken with a device registered to someone named Rowan Vance, and Keith was running that name through every database he had access to right now. He said he'd have a full profile for me within a few days, and hearing the certainty in his voice made everything feel more real. I felt this weird mix of validation and dread spreading through my chest. Validation because Keith was finding actual concrete information that proved I wasn't overreacting or imagining things, but dread because it meant this whole situation was real and serious, not just some misunderstanding I could laugh off later. Silas came over that evening without me even asking, showing up at my door with cleaning supplies and garbage bags. We spent 3 hours going through my entire apartment, removing anything Rowan might have touched. Every cup she drank from went in the trash. The towel she used got thrown out. We stripped my bed and washed everything twice, and Silas helped me wipe down every surface in my bedroom. It felt both practical and symbolic, like we were erasing her presence from my space, even though I knew the violation went deeper than physical objects. While we worked, my phone buzzed with a new text from Rowan. This one was longer than her previous messages, saying she missed me and really wanted to take me to dinner to clear the air. Then she named a specific restaurant, this little Italian place I'd mentioned liking once in passing during the wedding reception. The fact that she remembered that detail while lying about literally everything else made me feel surveilled in a way I couldn't quite explain. It was like she'd been collecting information about me, filing away my preferences and habits, all while pretending to be someone she wasn't. Silas read the message over my shoulder and said it was creepy as hell that she was tracking what I liked while maintaining this massive deception. I saved the text like Keith told me to, but didn't respond even though my hands were shaking. 2 days later, Keith sent his full report on Rowan Vance, and opening that email felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. The report was worse than anything I'd imagined in my worst spiraling thoughts at 3 hours in the morning. Rowan had a criminal record that included a misdemeanor fraud conviction from 3 years ago, but what really made my blood run cold was the restraining order filed against her by an ex in another county just 18 months ago. I read through the case summary 3 times, and each time it felt more like reading about my own experience. The man described Rowan lying about her identity when they first met. He talked about her love-bombing behavior, showering him with attention and affection. He explained how she refused to accept when he ended things, continuing to contact him through different numbers and accounts, and he detailed her veiled threats about ruining his reputation if he didn't give her another chance. Every single thing he described matched what was happening to me right now. Reading his words made me feel physically sick because I realized I wasn't her first victim. I was just the latest person in what was clearly a pattern of predatory behavior, and unless someone actually stopped her, I probably wouldn't be her last victim either. I printed out the entire report with shaking hands and grabbed my keys. Silas asked where I was going, and I told him I was taking everything to the police station because I couldn't just sit here knowing what Rowan was capable of. I felt scared and completely exhausted, but I was also determined not to let this go. The desk officer at the police station listened to my brief explanation and directed me to Detective Claire Mercer, who handled cases involving stalking and identity-based crimes. Mercer's office was small and cluttered with file folders, but her desk had photos of kids who I assumed were hers, which somehow made me feel slightly safer. She read through Keith's report carefully, taking her time with each page, and then started asking me detailed questions about everything Rowan had said and done. What exactly did she claim about her identity? When did I first realize she was lying? Had she asked for money or access to my account accounts? Did she ever explicitly threaten me? Mercer was professional and took me seriously, which was a relief after Wesley's dismissive reaction. But then she explained something that made my stomach sink. She said that unless Rowan had made explicit threats or actually stolen money from me, pursuing criminal charges was going to be really difficult. I wanted to scream or throw something, but I just sat there staring at the detective's desk while she explained my actual options. Mercer pulled out a form and said I could file for a restraining order in civil court, which wouldn't put Rowan in jail but would legally require her to stay away from me. She told me to save every text, every call, every social media message because documentation would be crucial if Rowan violated the order. Then she gave me practical safety advice that made everything feel more real and scary. She said I should change up my daily routines so Rowan couldn't predict where I'd be, that I should always be aware of my surroundings, especially in parking lots and when entering my apartment, and that I should trust my gut if something felt wrong. The way Mercer talked about it made it clear she'd seen situations like mine before, and that some of them had ended badly. I thanked her for her time and walked out of the station feeling like I had a plan, even if it wasn't the justice I wanted. Silas was waiting in his car, and when I got in, he immediately asked what happened. I explained about the restraining order option, and he said we should go file the paperwork right away before I lost my nerve. That afternoon, we drove to the courthouse and filled out the temporary restraining order application at a window where a tired-looking clerk processed domestic cases. I attached printed copies of everything from Keith's investigation, screenshots of Rowan's messages, the yearbook photo Wesley sent, and a written statement from real Satie confirming she wasn't at the wedding. The clerk looked through the stack of papers and told me there would be a hearing in about 2 weeks where a judge would decide whether to grant a longer order. She explained that the temporary order would be in effect until then, but that Rowan would be formally notified, which might make her angry. Silas squeezed my shoulder while the clerk stamped the forms, and I tried not to think about what Rowan would do when she found out. We grabbed coffee after, and Silas made me promise to call him if anything weird happened. Then, he drove me home because I was too shaky to drive myself. That night, I was getting ready for bed when my phone rang with Rowan's number. I stared at it buzzing on my nightstand and didn't answer, letting it go to voicemail while my heart pounded. A minute later, the voicemail notification popped up, and I almost deleted it without listening, but I remembered Mercer said to document everything. I put the phone on speaker and played the message. Rowan's voice sounded hurt and confused, asking why I was avoiding her and saying she thought we had something special. She said she didn't understand what changed and that she just wanted to talk things through like adults. Her tone was so convincing and wounded that for a second I actually felt guilty, like maybe I was overreacting to everything. Then I remembered the yearbook photo showing a completely different person, the criminal record Keith found, the restraining order from her ex describing the exact same behavior, and I felt sick that I almost fell for her act again. I saved the voicemail and forwarded it to Detective Mercer's email address like she told me to do. The next morning, Mercer replied, confirming that Rowan's pattern of ignoring my silence and continuing to contact me would support the restraining order application. She said that each message Rowan sent was actually helping my case, even though it felt invasive and scary. Knowing that Rowan was basically building evidence against herself with every text made me feel slightly less powerless, though I still jumped every time my phone buzzed with a new notification. I was trying to focus on work emails when Wesley called 2 days later. I almost didn't answer, but I knew he'd just keep calling, so I picked up. He asked if I was over my drama, yet in this breezy tone like I'd been upset about nothing, then said Mom was asking questions about why I wasn't coming to family dinners. Something inside me snapped hearing him act like this was all some minor inconvenience I was causing. I told him clearly that he set me up to be humiliated at his wedding, that his cruel plan created the exact opening Rowan needed to deceive me, and that I wasn't going to pretend everything was fine anymore just to make family gatherings comfortable for him. Wesley immediately got defensive, saying he had no idea Rowan would pretend to be Satie, and that I couldn't blame him for her choices. I felt my jaw clench because technically he was right that he didn't know about Rowan specifically, but he completely missed the point that his cruelty enabled the whole situation. I told him I needed space from him and that I wasn't going to discuss it further right now. He started to say something about me being dramatic, but I hung up before he could guilt trip me into backing down like I always did. My hands were shaking after I ended the call because I'd never stood up to Wesley like that before. Silas came over that evening and I told him about the conversation while we ate takeout on my couch. He pointed out that I'd never set real boundaries with Wesley in my entire life and that what I did was actually progress, even though it felt uncomfortable and scary. We talked about how my lifelong pattern of keeping peace in my family had made me vulnerable to Rowan's manipulation because I was so used to ignoring red flags to maintain relationships. Silas said that learning to recognize when someone was treating me badly and actually doing something about it was a skill I'd been prevented from developing. Over the next week, Rowan's messages shifted in tone from confused and hurt to slightly more aggressive. She sent texts asking why I was playing games with her and saying she deserved an explanation for my behavior. I didn't respond to any of them, but I saved every single one. And the tone change confirmed exactly what Detective Mercer had warned me about. People like Rowan escalated when they lost control over a situation, and Rowan was clearly getting frustrated that her usual tactics weren't working. Each message felt a little more demanding and a little less friendly. Then Keith called with new information he'd found by tracing utility records to Rowan's current address. He He said Rowan was on probation for the previous fraud conviction, which meant any new criminal behavior could result in actual jail time. I felt a surge of hope hearing that because it seemed like real leverage. But when I mentioned it to Detective Mercer, she cautioned me not to confront Rowan directly with the information. She said that could be seen as threatening and might hurt my restraining order case. The day before the hearing, Rowan sent a message that made my blood go cold. She said she knew I'd been investigating her and that I should be careful about making accusations I couldn't prove. The threat was clear, even though she didn't say anything explicitly violent. I screenshot the message immediately with shaking hands and forwarded it to both Detective Mercer and the lawyer Keith had recommended for a consultation. The lawyer replied within an hour saying this message significantly strengthened my case and that I should bring printed copies to the hearing tomorrow. I barely slept that night knowing I'd have to face Rowan in court the next day. Morning came. I walked into the courthouse with printed copies of every message Rowan had sent, my hands shaking as I went through security. The hearing lasted 40 minutes and the judge granted the restraining order without much debate after reviewing all the evidence Keith had gathered. Walking out of that courthouse felt like the first real step towards safety, but I knew a legal document wouldn't magically fix the damage Rowan had caused or make me trust people again overnight. Silas recommended I talk to someone who specialized in this kind of situation. So 2 weeks after the hearing, I started seeing Becca Hale, a therapist whose website mentioned trauma and boundary work. The first session felt awkward because I kept downplaying what happened, calling it a misunderstanding or saying it wasn't that bad compared to what other people go through. Becca stopped me halfway through and asked why I was minimizing something that clearly violated my safety and trust. I didn't have a good answer. Over the next several sessions, she helped me see the pattern between how Wesley had treated me my whole life and why I didn't recognize Rowan's red flags. I'd spent so many years making excuses for Wesley's cruelty to keep family peace that my instinct was to ignore warning signs and prioritize other people's comfort over my own safety. Becca said this wasn't a character flaw. It was a learned behavior from growing up in a family where speaking up about mistreatment got me labeled as sensitive or dramatic. In our third session, I told Becca about specific times Wesley had humiliated me growing up and how I'd always brushed it off as sibling rivalry or him just being competitive. She asked what I would think if a friend described their brother treating them that way, and I realized immediately that I'd tell them it was cruel and unacceptable. Somehow, I'd never applied that same standard to my own experiences. Becca gave me practical tools for recognizing manipulation tactics, like noticing when someone makes you feel responsible for their emotions or when they rewrite history to make you doubt your memory. She also taught me how to set boundaries without feeling guilty, which felt like learning a language I should have known my whole life. The work was uncomfortable because it meant acknowledging how much I'd tolerated and how that made me vulnerable to someone like Rowan. The financial cost of everything hit hard around week 5. Between Keith's investigator fees, the legal consultation, new locks, and a security camera for my apartment, and ongoing therapy sessions, I'd burned through most of my savings. I picked up every extra shift my manager offered and started doing side gigs on weekends just to cover the basics. Silas noticed I looked exhausted and offered to loan me money, but I turned him down even though I appreciated it. I needed to prove to myself that I could handle this independently without depending on someone to rescue me. The stress of working 60-hour weeks while processing trauma made me feel like I was running on empty, but giving up wasn't an option. I meal prepped cheap food on Sundays, canceled my streaming subscriptions, and stopped buying coffee out. Every dollar mattered when I was rebuilding my sense of security from scratch. Around week 7, some people from the wedding started reaching out asking what really happened with Rowan. I'd stayed off social media mostly, but apparently Rowan had been posting vague things about crazy exes and how some people can't handle genuine connection. A groomsman I barely knew sent a long message asking for my side of the story because he'd heard conflicting accounts. I realized Rowan was running her own counter-narrative to make me look unstable or vindictive. I wrote back a brief factual explanation to the people I actually trusted, saying Rowan had lied about her identity and that I'd gotten a restraining order after discovering her criminal history. I didn't go into detail about the manipulation or the violation I felt, just stuck to facts that could be verified. With everyone else, I let it go. Some people would believe Rowan's version no matter what I said, and trying to control the narrative with acquaintances I'd never see again wasn't worth my energy. It stung knowing people thought I was the problem. But Becca reminded me that people who matter would trust me, and people who didn't know me well enough to give me the benefit of the doubt weren't worth worrying about. 3 months after the restraining order, Detective Mercer called with news that shifted everything. Rowan had violated her probation by contacting one of her previous victims through a fake social media account, and the man had immediately reported it to police with screenshots. Her probation officer filed a violation report, and the judge revoked her probation, resulting in a 4-month jail sentence. Mercer explained this removed the immediate threat to me and created a documented pattern that would follow Rowan if she tried anything similar in the future. Knowing Rowan was actually facing consequences felt surreal after months of feeling like the system couldn't really protect me. Mercer said the jail time wasn't long, but it sent a clear message that Rowan's behavior had real repercussions, and the violation on her record would make any future restraining orders easier to enforce. I thanked Mercer for keeping me updated and for taking the situation seriously from the beginning when I'd felt like I was overreacting to everything. 6 months after the wedding, I took stock of where things stood. My apartment had a new security system with cameras covering the entrance and a smart lock I could monitor from my phone. The restraining order remained active with no violations since Rowan's jail time, and I'd learned to stop jumping every time I got a notification. Therapy with Becca was teaching me to trust my instincts instead of overriding them to keep other people comfortable, though I still caught myself minimizing things sometimes. My relationship with Wesley stayed distant with clear boundaries I'd set about not attending family events where he played the victim about the whole arrangement. Mom kept trying to smooth things over, but I'd stopped explaining myself and just repeated that I needed space. I still had moments of anxiety about dating and whether I'd ever trust someone enough to be vulnerable again. Sometimes I'd see a tall woman with dark hair, and my heart would race before I realized it wasn't Rowan. The situation didn't resolve perfectly with Rowan fully punished, or my family magically understanding what I went through, but I'd built real safety measures, and I was doing the ongoing work to heal, which felt like the most honest outcome I could ask for. I wasn't ignoring red flags anymore, or sacrificing my safety to keep peace, and that shift alone made all of it worth it.